from London originally. I have an older brother. He started playing the piano, so when I was about 7, I wanted to do anything he could do, and I started playing the piano. And I also have a younger sister, so the three of us just all loved music. I carried on having classical piano lessons till I was 18, but was never really wanting to follow that as a route into music. I was asked to play oboe for the school orchestra, so that was the beginning of wind instruments that then, in my early 20s, took up the saxophone. And I had this notion, I must have been about 22, and I'd had a couple of jobs, but really I knew I wanted to be a musician. And I'd started songwriting, and I'd been in my first band that was doing my material, it was great. It was such a buzz. I was in some really good bands, more like, not so much jazz, it was more like Aretha Franklin, Billie Holiday, R&B, soul, that kind of territory in London. The first band that was covering I was writing all the songs, was a band called the Spoil Sports, and we were an all-women's band, 5 of us. And it was really funky, like it was a great rhythm section. And I had no idea about running a band or getting gigs or anything to do with the administration of it, but that was just taken care of by a couple of other people in the band, and all I had to do was just write songs. I made this deal with myself that the piano was going to be earning me money, and so I would do restaurant gigs and any old, just to bring in money. And the saxophone was going to be always this territory that was kind of purity and soulful and just more like a more spiritual kind of territory as opposed to mercenary. And pretty much it stayed like that. I made a move to Ireland in 1986, and frankly it was because I hadn't been very well, and London, which had been so fabulous, suddenly became really difficult, with lower energy. And I came over to see some friends, and they just said, look, just come over here for a break, come over here to, it's a gentler pace of life. That was Dublin. And I fell in love with Dublin, and also felt really supported by a group of friends here who were saying, look, there's a place to live. And, it just seemed like the doors in London were closing and the doors in Dublin were opening, and I just went with my intuition about it. I have to say, in the beginning, I really missed multicultural London. I'd just been around so many different kinds of music, reggae, and there was a big South African jazz contingent, and all of that was going on. So there wasn't so much jazz. There was the kind of legacy of Louis Stewart and Jim Doherty, and then there was the Guilfoyles coming on with the Young Lions, and I then was in a group called Major to Minor. I was in a lot of different outfits actually during the 80s, but the continuous thread through that was Major to Minor, which was one of the first all-women, 3 of us groups in Ireland. And then from that moving to a group called Zrazy. That was all original material, and we just ploughed our own furrow, did everything DIY, ended up with a good enough career and touring and recording and support in the States and in Europe. In 2015, out of the blue, I had a call from Alan Smith, who I knew from promoting jazz in Ireland back in the 80s and 90s, and he was so active in bringing people like Wayne Shorter and Jan Garbrett to country. And he said he wanted to put on a festival, a long weekend festival of piano trios. and invited me to be part of that. And I was, me, piano trio. And at this time I'd shifted from saxophone to piano because the band I was in needed a piano player more than they needed a saxophone player. So I had jumped over, and so that was kind of that was quite a thing for me to take on, because I think, and as well to put my name on it, because I hadn't put my name on anything I'd ever done, and which would have been remarked on by, you know, people who know and love me. So it was like, okay, I've got to stick my head a bit above the parapet here, and take ownership of who I am and what I do. And so I called it the Carole Nelson Trio, and we performed at this festival. And when I say we, that myself on piano, Dominic Mullan on drums, and Cormac O'Brien on the bass, both of whom I'd already worked with. So I knew them, and I knew what they would bring and the support that they would give me. And then it went really well, and I thought we could make an album. So 2017, we recorded One Day in Winter. I wanted the music to feel like we're opening up windows, we're letting light in, we're letting space into the music, where it's not music about virtuosity. Let's maybe take that a little bit for granted, or at least that we're on a path toward that all the time as jazz musicians. But let's just open up the light into the music. And it was a glorious experience. I think we all felt great. And I remember saying, oh, it'd be great to do that again. And Cormac said, we should do one every year. And that was just so affirming to me that here I've got a team. Some of the tracks on Night Vision came out of a free improv session that we did in the studio, and then going back, editing, titling, fitting things all together. So one of the pieces, I called it Entomology, which was because it just takes off at a good swing and kind of slightly monkish vibe about it. And Entomology just seemed like a cool way to say, we have lineage here. We've received all this legacy from the past of the jazz greats. And I know everybody wants to just create new territory all the time, but you know, you have to bring that with you as well. I was very aware of living here and only being here because of the constrictions of the time, of how little wildness there is. Like even the hills, it's like there's overgrazing and da-da-da. And I found wildness in insects. And suddenly I was looking at insects. I was just engaging in more close quarters with my immediate environment, and I just saw them as these alien, extraordinary creatures. And so they found their way into Night Vision. I was beginning to become increasingly aware of the environmental climate crisis, and frankly, I was scared out of my wits. And I found a mentor who, a woman called Kathy Fitzgerald, who is involved in forestry or reforestry, and many other things, and basically gave me a kind of a post-grad course in ecology. And I wanted to bring that into the music to some extent, because it didn't seem quite enough just to talk about lovely nature. And it's not that I want to be a political musician, but I do want to bring all of myself into what I do. So if I'm thinking a lot about something or concerned about something, it's got to show up somewhere. BAM was set up to encourage women musicians in jazz in Ireland and to create opportunities. So one of which was an award for women in jazz for composition. And I thought, well, I will apply to that. And I had no idea what kind of project I wanted to do. And then I was watching a David Attenborough program about song in other species. So there were the things you might expect, like whales and even frogs and bird song. And then at the end, we listened to a recording of a bird called the kawioo, which I had never heard of. It's a Hawaiian bird. Or I should say it was a Hawaiian bird, because shortly after this recording was made in 1987, the bird species became extinct. And because the recording was of a male doing his courtship thing, and there was no answering reply, there's this feeling of possibility that this was actually the last of its species. So certainly it really kind of hits the heart. And so I felt that's something I could really express and wanted to spend some time with. And I wrote a 4-part piece that quite simply told the story of like a pristine Eden to begin with, and then encroachment, human deforestation, habitat destruction, pollution, all of those things that limit the worlds and lives of other creatures. And then a piece called The Last Song, and it was all based on a series of notes that I used in different ways throughout the piece. And the last song is, I thought of it as a space for grief, a space for loss. Yes, the last piece is called Return, which obviously in the case of an extinction, it's very unlikely, although not impossible, for a return. So it was framed, for me, it was a sense that it was more framed as a question. And I would put the question as, can we return to a right relationship with ourselves as human beings and with the rest of the creatures and beings we inhabit this world with? So that was a sense of possible hope, possible not. Throughout it, there's that tension. So we gave a few performances of that work last year at the London Jazz Festival, Manchester Jazz Festival, in Dublin, in Belfast. I wanted to write something that could sit with that and maybe just lighten it somewhat, but staying with the theme of telling a storyline. I wanted to tell the story of the swallows because they're just so full of joy and fabulousness. I thought I could tell the story as an arc of their migration, beginning in Central and Southern Africa, which then to me had overtones of, well, that's also where the human story begins, and it's also where the jazz story begins. So there were these overlapping resonances happening in the thought process. I don't know if you've ever watched swallows or migratory birds who are just about to leave but not quite, and one of them will take off and there's a flutter and then they all come back again. So I thought that's a nice way to describe a piece of music, that there's a sort of stuttering, rhythmic, slightly jerky beginning, and then off we go. There's this moment of departure. So yes, and then a sense of arrival and refuge. And again, I just felt like there were resonances. Here we have a story about a bird migration, and we are talking so much about migration and refuge in humans now as well. So it's allusive rather than direct. And in a way, I suppose, I'm telling this big, long story about what the music was about for me, but really, when it comes to listening to music or being in an audience live or listening to an album anyone can go wherever they want with it, you know, that's cool and that's just how it is. So you can take no notice at all of what I'm saying. I feel like on Night Vision we had this sense of we're going to push our boundaries right to the edge here now. We're just going to do that. And I feel like we just pulled it back in a little bit more lyrical. And for me, a sense of the lineage and the legacy of different composers who I've enjoyed so much and learned so much from. So Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock, Thelonious Monk, that era of music. So I've got 3 dates in October. The Cooler on the 9th in Dublin. In Visual, Carlow, the theatre there, the George Bernard Shaw Theatre, on the 12th. And 23rd of October in Billy Burns in Kilkenny. Bandcamp for downloads and for CD orders, and I think there's going to be quite a few physical distribution places. I know it's going to Japan. In fact, all those titles that I was talking about are going to go to Japan. And delighted to be supported here by Livia Records. Involved in improvising across boundaries, thank you. And I think there's going to be performance, and I'm really looking forward to who I might be working with in improvisation with that, and that'll shake me up a bit. And the other thing is more of a reflection on the last 10 years, and I'm 70 now this year, and thinking, okay, my 60s, I just really hit the sweet spot for myself, and I'm so proud of what we've achieved together, and it is together, I tell you, without Cormac and Dominic and the adventure we've been on and the trust we have for each other in performance and I just suddenly thought, well, why can't my 70s be the same? So if I can keep body and soul together, and I hope to just continue. And I think to continue with the trio, because I'm so kind of, I'm kind of enchanted by the process of development when there is trust. And yeah, it's a fantastic thing. Musicians get injuries really easily, RSI injuries, and I've had a number of different injuries that made my pursuit of virtuosity a little bit more curtailed. But that has turned out to be actually a really good thing. So there was a time when I couldn't play the piano for a couple of years, and I would sit there and just weep. But then I gradually just got to, okay, I'm just going to raise my hands and drop them down and listen to wherever they fall. And that has actually become the basis of how I now compose and perform. So, yeah, I've had a number of conversations with musicians who have had to completely rethink whatever it is that drives us and the tension behind that, when it really causes big problems. How, yeah, are you going to give up completely, or are you going to open up a different kind of space? So I've reflected a lot on jazz culture, and being someone who was absolutely ambitious and determined to be excellent, and it gave me problems. So yeah, that's been a really interesting journey over the last 2 or 3 decades. And I'm very, very happy with how, out of necessity, I had to open up a whole different space for creativity and self-expression. And I think particularly, you know, when I've been asked about being a woman, being female in jazz, which is historically such a male milieu, I think that issue comes up of competitiveness and kind of showing off a bit. I'm not over and above doing that myself. However, I think now it's great to really have energy, you know, to say what I want is this free fall, running, go, you know, flying, whatever it might be. So if the energy is that, then to express that. But it's different from look how fast I can be. Or maybe it isn't.